Next slide, please. So I'm here today on behalf of the Indiana Department of Transportation to talk to you about some of the work we've done to develop an automated camera mover in the state. So this has been a team effort, and there's so many people who haven't been shown.
Set timer for 8 minutes.
Next slide, please. So again, this work's been supported by the Joint Transportation Research Program here at Purdue and the Indiana Department of Transportation. What I'm about to present to you reflects the views of us here at Purdue and not necessarily the Indiana Department of Transportation. And this work has been published in several places, including the report here. And if we go to the next slide, you can find the publications. In the top left is the main project publication, and then the remainder are associated publications, which will give you more detail, or feel free to reach out to me or anyone at the team to get further insights on this work. So without further ado, next slide. The aim of this project was to augment the Federal Highway Traffic Incident Management timeline and propose a T2I you'll see circled in blue. This was our metric to allow us to measure the detection/verification time, specifically in metropolitan areas, with the goal of trying to reduce the time it takes to get cameras positioned onto incidents on the interstates. Next slide, please. So this is what we define as our traditional framework for how cameras were moved. It would start off with calls come in from motorists going to the 911 operators, those being passed to the TMC operators, and then they would have the task of finding the nearest camera, moving it, and running through that iterative process until they find the correct camera in these dense camera networks in the metropolitan areas. And that is what we identified as slowing down the process. Not at any fault of the operators, but due to the nature of the system they're working in. Next slide, please. So our proposed methodology to aid this is using data-driven insights. So we have an incident occurrence, and we are going to use potentially 3, and I'm going to talk about mostly 2 sources of data to generate these camera movements and their notifications for the TMC operators. Next slide, please. So those 3 steps I'm going to talk to you today about is the camera to mile marker, a camera to GPS, and then finally a camera to connected vehicle data. So the first one is the easiest to implement, but shows the power of the results if we can get the last 2 working. Next slide, please. So the camera to mile marker is essentially a lookup table of preset positions to which we assigned a visibility to. What you're seeing in the back is the data table where you manually move the camera to, say, in our case, the linear reference post, the mile markers, the blue signs on the side of the road, capture the position, the pan tilt zoom of the CCTV cameras at that location, and then assign, can we see all of the roadway? Can we only see part of the roadway? And can we see none of the roadway? And then we can map that onto a heat map to kind of show the density where you have multiple cameras seeing identical sections of the interstate. So next slide. The video plays. This video is showing kind of a demonstration of that tool at work. This in the current state was manually being moved, so it would help newer operators by showing them which cameras they can pick to see sections of roadway and aid in that decision making without having to know the system to the extent of some of the more experienced operators in the TMC with them. As you see, this is a green, so we can see all the roadway, and as we move farther away, we can kind of see less and less of the roadway with some of the foliage, and then farther yet, even less. Next slide, please. So the proposed kind of flow we came up with to integrate this was using the agency vehicle telematics, or the safety patrol vehicle telematics, coming in every 30 seconds or so. Once they've stopped for 60 seconds on the roadway, on the interstate rather, we then look through that lookup table. We find what's that nearest mile marker. We reference those coordinates we had manually defined in the table, and then we move the camera and tell the operator that we move the camera to a stop safety patrol vehicle. So next slide, please. This is the Indiana Hoosier Helpers, who are those safety patrol vehicles. sending their telematics. Next slide. So the power of this is we don't have to wait on the operator to be told that the safety patrol is stopped, or even sometimes that message is not always communicated because the incident or object on the roadway in this case requires kind of immediate attention, where information is kind of taken down the hierarchical approach and action just needs to be taken. Notice that the operator's in the middle of these travel lanes without any other kind of blocking vehicles, just to get the debris out of the roadway and prevent a future crash that is likely imminent to happen in a situation like this. One thing to note on this slide is that the service patrol vehicle is clearly in the screen, which is the ideal case. We want to see that we actually captured what was going on. So on the next slide, we get a case where that's maybe not so great. And this is what we're going to say: red, thumbs down. We're going to call this a failing movement on the camera, despite it actually capturing the vehicle. So next slide. We went and did an assessment, doing that pass-fail approach on the cameras, and we found that about 54% of the time, over the dozens of movements every day that were being made, the cameras are actually capturing the vehicle. Next slide. And that brings us to the future development we wanted to do with the camera to GPS. So this is going to be less reliant on the manual mapping on that table and more continuous in the sense that you can click on a map and the camera will move. But next slide. And this is a brief video showing that, where now, instead of set points, which those blue dots represent what we could move to before, we can now move to any point at those dots or not at those dots on the ramps or anything else. So it's a much more diverse system that can actually see anywhere on the interstate where the camera can see within reason. Next slide, please. Again, we applied the service patrol vehicle telematics data to this as the trigger. So if they stopped on the interstate for 60 seconds, that would trigger the movement. But then in this case, instead of finding the nearest mile marker, we actually just take the GPS position from the telematics data received. And then next slide. This is what that kind of process looks like. So from the red on the left in the bottom picture, we go to the green thumbs up. We fed the same GPS points in and it actually works. So next slide. Talking about the implementation of this system, we deployed to about 100 cameras, limited to 50 or so just for quality control. And next slide. We performed the same visual analysis of the images. And while we lost some movements, we gained almost doubling our accuracy in terms of camera movements. So that's 90% of the time the image we capture as soon as we move the camera actually captures the incident and the patrol vehicle. And since this has been running nonstop with the Indiana Department of Transportation's cameras in Indianapolis since July of 2024, and we've made over 4,000 movements on less than 60 cameras. Now scaling that to the 800 in the system, you could see where we are aiding the operators by making a lot of these movements to incidents and kind of giving more reassurance that these cameras are being pointed at the incidents as they occur. Next slide, please. The final kind of approach to this would be, instead of using the telematics data in the next slide, please, we're going to use connected vehicle slowdown data. And one more slide, please. So, and this is a spatial temporal heat map, so it shows the mile marker on the y-axis, it shows the time on the x-axis, and then it's colored by speed. So what we're essentially aiming to do with this is find the front of queues, which is where the pink line starts at the very top of this plot, and derive the position we need to move the camera to that. So now we're not waiting on any kind of responder to get to scene. We can see in the speeds on the roadways. We can make the determination, is there a slowdown occurring? And then we can send the movement to the camera and then alert the operator and reduce the actual detection time and verification time from the TIM timeline. And next slide. For further details, please see these papers or feel free to contact me. With that, I'll pass it back to Jim. Thank you.